In abusive relationships, cruelty, aggression, and disrespect often define the dynamic between two people, whether they are partners, spouses, relatives, or colleagues. When such behavior is overt, the perpetrator may be dismissed as merely hot-headed or emotionally unstable. But the far more insidious form of abuse is the one that hides behind closed doors, masked by smiles, public displays of affection, and the illusion of a perfect life. To the outside world, everything appears harmonious until a tragedy reveals the truth. That was the case with Alsu Sabashnikova and Timur Prokhorov. Their relationship was admired by those around them, seen as a shining example of young love, mutual respect, and unwavering support. Both came from the small, close-knit rural community of Messiah, where they met during their school years. After years of dating, they seemed destined to spend their lives together. Before we explore the case, if you'd like to support the channel, hit the subscribe button and stay active. It really helps a lot. Now, let's get into it. Their wedding was grand, a celebration filled with joy and hope, attended by family and friends from across the region. But just 3 days after the festivities, the newlyweds were buried side by side in the same grave. What happened to them? And how did a picture-perfect love story turn into tragedy? Alsu Sabashnikova, who would later take on the surname Prokhorova, was born on January 4, 2001, in the village of Meleks, located in the Tuvy district of the Republic of Tatarstan. She was the youngest of 2 children. Her older brother Ruslan was fiercely protective of her, always by her side as both a sibling and a friend. When their parents divorced during their school years, the children remained with their mother, Elira Shira. Soon after, Elira remarried, and the family moved to the village of Msoya, about 12 miles from the larger city of Naberezhnye-Chelny. Despite the changes, Alsu and Ruslan adapted quickly. They formed a strong bond with their new stepfather, who treated them as if they were his own children. In time, both children came to call him Dad. The village of Msoya was small and peaceful, home to just over 2,000 people. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Life moved at a slower pace compared to the bustling cities, and Alsu and her brother quickly felt at home. They enrolled in the local school, made friends, and immersed themselves in village life. The community consisted mostly of Russians, Tatars, and Udmurts. Social life centered around the local community center, which held weekly dances and classes in performing arts, dance, and choral singing. On holidays, the village came alive with concerts and talent shows that brought everyone together. Alsu stood out not only for her academic excellence. She was a strata student admired by her teachers for her intelligence, responsibility, and maturity, but also for her inner calm and grace. She was known as a natural diplomat, someone who could resolve conflicts with a gentle word. Beautiful, kind, and approachable, Alsu was the kind of person others gravitated toward. Everyone wanted to be her friend. Her closest companion, from childhood until her final days, was her cousin, Sabrina Sabashnikova. Sabrina was 3 years younger than Alsu, but the age difference never seemed to matter. The two were inseparable, sharing secrets, dreams, and an unbreakable sisterly bond. They resembled each other so closely that strangers often mistook them for siblings. Tragically, both girls would eventually share the same devastating fate. From a young age, Alsu struggled with serious health issues. A severe viral infection had damaged her kidneys, leading to chronic kidney failure, a condition that only worsened over time. She was forced to undergo regular hemodialysis treatments at a specialized clinic in Naberezhnye-Chelny. These procedures, which filtered toxins from her blood, were life-saving but exhausting, and they became a permanent part of her routine. Her family, though loving and supportive, was not wealthy. The ongoing costs of treatment, medications, and travel to the clinic placed a heavy financial burden on them. During periods when her condition worsened, Also had to withdraw from school and continue her studies from home. These absences made it difficult for her to prepare properly for graduation and entrance exams. Despite everything, she remained determined to continue her education. Her dream was to study economics at the prestigious Naberezhny-Chelny branch of Kazan Innovative University, but the challenges were many. Her health made university life demanding, and her family simply couldn't afford tuition. Her mother, trying to encourage her, suggested an alternative path: vocational training. If Alsu could learn a skill, she could earn a stable income and possibly return to higher education later. Always optimistic, Alsu embraced the idea. She completed courses in eyelash extension and nail care, eventually starting to take clients at home. This setup allowed her to work without overexerting herself, a perfect balance considering her fragile health. It was during her school years that Alsu met Timur Prokhorov, a high school student for years her senior. Their connection was immediate, and their bond deepened quickly into a committed relationship. Despite Alsu's openness about her health condition, Timur did not waver. Instead, he promised they would face her illness together, no matter the difficulty. Timur Prokhorov was born in 1997 in Naberezhny-Chelny. He was the younger of two sons in a financially stable family. His parents owned a small business that provided them with a comfortable life, ability to offer their children good educational opportunities. Timur's older brother, Artur, earned a law degree and went on to work in the Ministry of Internal Affairs. In the late 2000s, the Prokhorov family purchased land in the village of Msoya and began building a house. Years later, they moved in with their sons, and the boys helped complete the construction while also contributing to household responsibilities. According to friends, teachers, and neighbors, Timur was known for his calm demeanor. He avoided conflict and valued peaceful resolution. He wasn't someone to let his pride get in the way. If he made a mistake, he would apologize. While not an outstanding student, he was respectable in his academics and deeply involved in the local art scene. He performed in dance groups and regularly appeared at community events, continuing to participate even as an adult. When Artur got married during his university years, he returned to Naberezhny-Chelny with his wife and later had 2 children. The family remained close-knit, and Timur developed a strong bond with his nephews and nieces, often doting on them and spending quality time together. After graduating, Timur served in the Russian Navy. During this time, Alsu waited faithfully for his return. It was during his military service that Timur faced a personal tragedy. His mother was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. Despite every effort to save her, she passed away within a few months. A year later, Timur's father remarried. The new stepmother was quickly accepted by the family, and Timur, along with his brother, welcomed her with open arms. Not long afterward, Timur's parents relocated back to Naberezhny-Chelny to focus on their business, leaving the nearly completed house in Msoya to Timur, who continued working on it alone. By this time, Timur and Alsu's relationship had grown even stronger. He returned from military service with a renewed sense of purpose. He resumed his studies and began working at the family business, earning enough to support both himself and Alsu. He remained committed to her well-being and their future, never once backing away from the responsibilities that came with her health challenges. To those who knew them, Alsu and Timur were an example of enduring love. But beneath the surface of what seemed like a fairy tale romance, a far more complicated and troubling story was unfolding. One that no one saw coming, and one that would soon end in unimaginable loss. Despite her growing health challenges, Alsu refused to be a burden on anyone. Determined to contribute in whatever way she could, she continued working from home, focusing on eyelash extensions and self-care services. But as her condition worsened, she was forced to give up even this modest income. The chemicals and materials used in nail treatments began to affect her severely. She simply couldn't risk it anymore. Throughout this difficult period, Timur remained a steadfast source of support. He was devoted to Alsu, driving her regularly to medical appointments in Nabrozhny Chelny and even to Kazan when needed. He was there through every treatment, every test, every hospital visit, always watching over her, always putting her first. His compassion extended beyond Alsu to her family. Her mother had grown to see Timur not just as a son-in-law, but as a true son in every sense. By 2018, Alsu's health began to spiral downward. Her kidneys were failing rapidly. She could no longer survive without constant dialysis. The only real hope for survival was a kidney transplant. Miraculously, her mother was a suitable match. But while hope was within reach, it came at a steep cost. The surgery, post-operative care, and ongoing treatments were far beyond what the family could afford. Alsu's condition grew critical. Her body began to retain fluid, causing severe swelling. Her face became almost unrecognizable, and it deeply affected her. She was heartbroken, not just by the pain, but by how the illness had changed her appearance. At one point, she tried to push Timur away, asking him not to visit her in the hospital. She didn't want him to see her like that, but Timur refused. He would not abandon her. He stayed by her side, no matter how difficult it became. Word of Alsu's deteriorating health spread quickly through the small village. Her story touched the hearts of neighbors and strangers alike. The community rallied together in an extraordinary act of compassion. A charity concert was organized at the local cultural center, with all proceeds dedicated to funding Alsu's surgery. Timur himself took the stage that night as part of a dance troupe, performing not just for art, but for the life of the woman he loved. In a short time, the necessary funds were raised. Alsu and her mother were able to travel to a renowned clinic in Moscow, where a highly experienced surgeon agreed to take on the complicated case. Against all odds, the surgery was successful. Both women came through the procedure with remarkable strength. For the first time in a long time, there was hope. Life had given Alsu another chance. Though the transplant surgery had saved Alsu's life, the battle was far from over. A long and arduous recovery lay ahead. She was prescribed an intensive regimen of medications, a strict diet, and routine medical checkups to ensure her body didn't reject the transplanted kidney. For nearly 6 months, Alsu remained hospitalized. Even after she was discharged, her life became one of isolation. For a full year, she remained inside her home, avoiding any potential infection, because even something as simple as a cold could prove fatal. Despite the physical and emotional toll, Alsu was disciplined and determined. She followed every instruction from her doctors, no matter how difficult. Her family, her mother, stepfather, and brother, remained by her side, providing unwavering emotional and practical support. But they couldn't help but worry about her relationship with Timur. Not every young man they knew would be willing or able to carry the weight of such hardship. But Timur had never once faltered. During Alsu's illness, he practically lived at the hospital. After her return home, he was a constant presence, helping with everything from long drives to faraway clinics, to personally tracking down rare medications. His loyalty and love were unquestionable. It came as no surprise when, shortly after Alsu's recovery, he officially proposed. In August 2021, the couple held their nikah, a sacred Islamic wedding ceremony, and were officially joined in marriage. They moved into Timur's family home, which was still under construction but livable. Alsu returned to working from home in a limited capacity, while Timur commuted daily to Nabrozhny Chelny for work. They began saving for a grand celebration. The date was set, a full wedding in January. On January 4th, 2022, Alsu celebrated her 21st birthday, and just over 2 weeks later, On January 20th, their dream wedding came to life. The celebration was held at her parents' home, filled with joy, music, and loved ones from across the Republic. For 3 days, the air buzzed with laughter, dancing, and the hopes of a beautiful future. Guests described the young couple as radiant, completely in love. Timur touched hearts when he asked Alsu's mother, Ilira, if he could call her mom. Overcome with emotion, she thanked fate for sending such a devoted man into her daughter's life. Among the guests was Sabrina, Alsu's 18-year-old cousin and lifelong best friend, who had traveled from another city to be by her side as bridesmaid. She had planned to return on January 23rd, just before classes resumed. In the meantime, she stayed with the newlyweds, sleeping in a separate room in their home. Other out-of-town guests were accommodated in the homes of relatives, since there were no hotels nearby. On the night of January 23rd, Ilira was overcome by a sense of dread. She had a vivid and disturbing dream. Her daughter was missing, and her son-in-law was silently dropping small coins into her hands. She awoke around 5 a.m., heart pounding. She tried to calm herself, telling herself it was just a dream, but the unease lingered. She debated calling Alsu, but thought it was too early. By 7 a.m., the anxiety had grown unbearable. She picked up the phone, but there was no answer. Not from Alsu, not from Timur, not from Sabrina. Worried, Ilira and her husband decided to check on the couple. When they arrived at the house around 7:30 a.m., they immediately noticed Timur's car was gone. At first, this didn't raise alarm, but when they approached the front door and found it unlocked, panic gripped them. They stepped inside, calling out, but were met with silence. Then, in the living room, Ilira saw what no mother should ever have to see. Alsu and Sabrina were lying on the floor, lifeless, surrounded by pools of blood. Their bodies were cold, stiff, covered in wounds. It was a horrifying, brutal scene, one that would haunt the family forever. Both young women had been stabbed multiple times, the attacks inflicted with a knife and scissors. Ilira collapsed in shock, screaming. Her husband ran to call emergency services. Police arrived on the scene by 7:50 a.m., quickly sealing off the area. But for Ilira, the pain was too much to bear. She began experiencing heart problems and had to be treated on the scene. In her devastation, she could barely speak, crying, shaking, unable to comprehend that her daughter was truly gone. As news spread, neighbors and relatives began gathering outside the home, devastated by the incomprehensible loss. Forensic experts documented the crime scene, noting the sheer violence of the attack. Over a dozen stab wounds had been inflicted on each of the young women. It was clear they had been killed hours earlier. Strangely, no weapons were found at the scene of the double homicide. That immediately raised red flags for investigators, and one person's absence loomed large. Timur, he was nowhere to be found. His phone was switched off, his car was missing. And just like that, the man who had once been praised as a devoted husband and gentle soul became the prime suspect in a brutal double murder. At first, the idea seemed inconceivable to those who knew him. Timur's relatives were quick to defend him, insisting he was incapable of violence. Family members, friends, and even local residents echoed the same sentiment. Timur loved Alsu deeply. He had devoted years of his life to caring for her through a debilitating illness. Many said he had practically carried her through her darkest days. According to their accounts, the couple rarely even argued, and if they did, Timur never raised his voice, let alone his hand. But as the investigation deepened, a more troubling picture began to emerge. A few neighbors stepped forward to contradict the earlier claims. They alleged that Timur wasn't as calm and kind as he appeared. According to them, he was a controlling and possessive man, plagued by jealousy over his wife's beauty and charm. Some said private arguments had occurred behind closed doors, and their voices had occasionally been overheard through thin walls. One neighbor even recalled Alsu crying alone outside late at night after what seemed to be a particularly harsh confrontation. They said Alsu often carried guilt about being a burden due to her illness, and that Timur may have manipulated that vulnerability, allegedly telling her that no one else would love her the way he did, that without him, she'd be alone. The cracks in their perfect image were small but chilling. The night before the tragedy was a Saturday. Timur and a group of his friends had stayed late at the couple's house, drinking and chatting into the early morning hours. Nothing about the gathering had seemed unusual until Timur went out to see the guests off. It was past midnight, but instead of returning promptly, he vanished for nearly an hour and a half. During that time, Alsu became worried. She messaged her close friend Anna, explaining that Timur hadn't come back and that she couldn't reach him. He had left his phone behind. She was uneasy, unsure where he had gone or why. Then, at 2 a.m., Alsu sent a final message to Anna. Timur had returned, she wrote. Everything was fine. They were heading to bed. She thanked her friend for checking in and ended with a smiley emoji. There was nothing in that message to suggest anything was wrong. On the contrary, it sounded like any other peaceful night. But less than 6 hours later, Alsu and her cousin Sabrina would be found stabbed to death in their home. Investigators began piecing together a theory. Timur, likely under the influence of alcohol, may have been consumed by jealousy. Perhaps a message or conversation had triggered something in him, something dark. Upon returning, he may have confronted Alsu in a fit of rage. A heated argument could have spiraled out of control, and in that moment, investigators believed he may have grabbed a weapon and committed an unspeakable act. Then, in the aftermath, realizing what he had done, he fled the scene in his car. On the evening of January 23rd, just hours after the bodies were discovered, a breakthrough came. Along a remote stretch of road toward Yellow Buga, in the parking lot of a small roadside cafe, a car was found. It was a Lada Priora, Timur's car. Inside was the lifeless body of a young man. He had suffered a single gunshot wound under the chin. The weapon, a rifle, was still in his hands. It appeared to be a suicide. The body was quickly identified. It was 25-year-old Timur Prokhorov, the same man who had once vowed to love and protect Alsu for the rest of his life. Police traced the weapon and confirmed it belonged to Timur's father. It had been stored in a locked safe at the family home where Timur and Alsu lived. Investigators now believe Timur had taken it with him that night, already knowing what he intended to do. The decision had likely been made not long after the murders. Further evidence surfaced from a nearby security camera. Surveillance footage from a building opposite the Prokhorov home captured the timeline. Around midnight, Timur is seen leaving the house with his friends. Roughly an hour and a half later, he returns, alone. Curiously, after Timur re-entered the house around 2 a.m., the surveillance footage captured no further movement. The camera, positioned toward the street, had a limited range. It couldn't see the driveway or the path leading away from the rear of the house. Investigators concluded that Timur could have left again shortly afterward, simply moving out of view. The darkness of the early morning hours, combined with the camera's narrow angle, left a gap in the timeline, an eerie blind spot during which something terrible likely occurred. That same night, just a short distance away, a local club was hosting a dance event. The Prokhorovs' house sat within walking distance of the venue. Some assumed the newlyweds might attend, but they stayed in, entertaining their cousin and other guests. Sometime during the night, a car, unfamiliar to neighbors, pulled into their driveway, then quickly drove away. No one got a clear look at the driver, and no one ever came forward. The following morning, after news of the tragedy began to spread, Two young men arrived in the neighborhood looking for Timur. They asked a few people questions, seemed shaken by what they heard, and then disappeared. Witnesses later struggled to recall any details about their appearance. Who they were or why they were looking for Timur remained a mystery. As the investigation progressed, a strange and troubling detail surfaced. Authorities in Novocherny Chelny were approached by a 47-year-old massage therapist, whose name was never made public. She ran a discreet business out of her home, offering both massage and, reportedly, intimate services. According to her statement, Timur had been one of her regular clients. On the night of the murders, around 2:30 a.m., Timur texted her. He asked if she was available. She replied that she was waiting for him. Some reports allege that Timur did, in fact, visit her that night, after the crime had already been committed. What happened next was deeply disturbing. According to the woman's initial statement, Timur arrived disheveled and tense. They engaged in what she described as a consensual encounter. But when she asked for payment afterward, Timur refused. A heated argument erupted. She threatened to report him. He responded with rage, insulting her, striking her several times. She claimed that, beyond the physical assault, Timur had also sexually violated her. She filed a police report shortly afterward. But then, inexplicably, she withdrew her complaint. The woman refused to give interviews, and her identity remained protected. Locals began whispering that Timur's family, reportedly well-connected in law enforcement circles, had quietly intervened. Whether through influence, intimidation, or financial pressure, they had managed to suppress the allegations. The therapist never spoke of the incident again. This disturbing side of Timur, the violence, the entitlement, the alleged assault, stood in stark contrast to the image he had cultivated over the years. For those who knew him as a kind, caring husband, the revelations were almost impossible to reconcile. But investigators couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. If he had visited the therapist that night, it would explain the hour and a half that Alsu had been unable to reach him, time that remained unaccounted for. One theory began to take shape. Timur may have visited the woman before returning home. Upon his return, something triggered an argument. Perhaps Alsu discovered his messages. Perhaps she confronted him. Perhaps Sabrina, fiercely loyal to her cousin, stood up for Alsu. In the storm of jealousy, guilt, and anger, something inside Timur may have snapped. He may have reached for the nearest weapon, first the knife, then a pair of scissors, and in a frenzy of violence, taken both of their lives. In the hours after the murders, Timur appeared online one final time. At exactly 7:03 a.m. on January 23rd, he logged into his social media account. Investigators would later conclude this was around the time he died by suicide, ending the chain of events that had begun with betrayal and ended in bloodshed. Still, for many, especially Alsu's family, the official narrative felt incomplete. They refused to believe that the quiet, attentive young man they had welcomed into their family was capable of such horror. To them, the Timur they knew simply didn't match the Timur described in the investigation. He would never hurt her, Alsu's mother would later say. He lived for her. If something happened, it wasn't him, or he wasn't himself. Those who believed in his innocence clung to that idea, that he had been driven by something beyond comprehension, or that someone else had played a role. To this day, some insist the true story has never been fully told. During the forensic search of the Prokhorov home, investigators uncovered a troubling clue, one that casts new doubt on Timur's state of mind in the hours leading up to the tragedy. In a small locked drawer, they discovered a large quantity of prescription medications. These were not ordinary pills. They had originally been prescribed to Timur's mother, a woman who had battled cancer before her passing. After her death, The medications, potent painkillers and sedatives had not been disposed of. Instead, they remained hidden away in the house, untouched by time but carefully stored. It now appeared that someone had been accessing them, quietly, secretly. This discovery gave rise to another possible theory. Had Timur been abusing these medications? Had he been self-medicating grief, stress, or something darker in the shadows of his seemingly quiet life? And what if, on that final night, he had taken a dangerously high dose, perhaps mixing it with alcohol? The combination could have triggered hallucinations, paranoia, or sudden, uncontrollable aggression. A man under the influence of such a cocktail might become someone else entirely, unrecognizable even to himself. If this theory held any truth, then the violence might not have stemmed from jealousy, infidelity, or rage, but from a drug-induced break with reality. And when the fog lifted, and he realized what he had done, Timur may have believed there was only one way out. In the end, no criminal case was ever officially filed. With the suspected perpetrator dead, the investigation was closed. There was no trial, no final verdict, only a grieving community and a family left with unbearable questions. Alsu's mother, steadfast in her belief that Timur could never have harmed her daughter, made an unexpected and deeply symbolic request that the young couple be buried together, side by side, in the village cemetery. They loved each other, she said. They should not be separated, even in death. The image of their shared grave became an enduring symbol of both tragedy and denial, a place where love and horror were intertwined, and where the truth was forever buried in silence. News of the double tragedy quickly swept through the quiet village, sending ripples of shock and sorrow across the Republic of Tatarstan. Regional media outlets descended upon the town, eager to report the sensational case. But those closest to the victims remained silent. Neither the Prokhorov nor the Sabashnikova families agreed to speak with journalists. In contrast, many villagers, some who barely knew the couple, readily stepped forward, offering dramatic interviews laced with speculation. Wild rumors began to circulate. Some claimed there had been a third person in the house. Others whispered of cults, revenge plots, or affairs. The truth, already fragile, became clouded by fiction. On January 26th, Timur's father broke the family's silence. In a rare and emotional interview, he claimed that the autopsy had revealed signs of physical abuse on his son's body. Bruises, he said. He also stated there had been little blood in the car where Timur was found, suggesting that his son may have been killed elsewhere and his body moved to stage a suicide. For a moment, the narrative shifted. But the next day, officials with the Regional Investigative Committee publicly refuted the father's claims. They confirmed that Timur's body showed no signs of external violence, apart from a single gunshot wound, fired under the chin, at a precise upward angle. The conclusion was clear. Timur Prokhorov had taken his own life. Yet, for many, the contradictions and unanswered questions refused to fade. The image of the young man who had once cared so tenderly for his ailing wife simply didn't align with the portrait painted by the investigation. Even those who accepted the forensic findings struggled to understand how a man so deeply devoted could be capable of such devastation. Was it love turned into madness? Was it a momentary loss of control? Or was there something else, something still hidden in the shadows of that cold January night? Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support truly means a lot. Don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment, and share it with others. It really helps the channel grow. Your engagement makes a huge difference. See you in the next one.